never again. So it's for the best. I'm Hannah Bradford. I am wife to Jordan and homeschool mom to 6 awesome kids, 11 and under. Long story short, no one has matching socks, and yes, we do own a 12-passenger van because we had to fit in with the crowd. So we've been fostering through Pathway since the beginning of 2021. I first just wanted to express my gratitude for each and every one of you. Just by sitting here tonight, you've already committed time and finances and attention towards such an incredible cause. Not everyone can take children in foster care, but everyone has the opportunity to care about foster children. So I commend you, and I thank you for not turning a blind eye to the hard, but instead engaging and supporting an organization that firmly prioritizes and advocates for vulnerable children and families. I also want to thank Kim and Pathway for entrusting me with this incredible opportunity. Kim can attest to this, but when she called me, I saw her name on my phone and I kind of had a gut feeling what she was going to ask for. But before she could even ask, there was an interruption by a toddler screaming about a minor boo-boo, and then another toddler throwing a fit about the color of his cup, and then me juggling the phone while I made a bottle for a hungry baby. She asked if I wanted to call her back at a calmer time, but I knew that was 18 years from now. So figured we better just power through. So Kim was patient, and she paused when she heard little voices, and she commiserated with the joys and the struggles of having little ones. And that's just one example of Pathway. That's why it's such an honor to be speaking on their behalf. They are patient, they're family focused, they meet each family where they are, and they work to meet needs personally. And in this case, I think Kim knew this mom needed a date night. So we were actually here for the steak, but we're really happy to speak. It's pretty miraculous. We found sitters for our 6 kids. We had to divide them between 4 houses tonight. We did arrive on time, and no one had spit up on them, so pretty neat. But the true miracle is that I'm standing here today speaking on a cause that I once wanted absolutely nothing to do with. Since our dating days, my husband and I always had adoption on our hearts, but internationally. I once told an adoptive mom I wanted absolutely nothing to do with domestic adoption or foster care ever, ever, ever. She could see me now. So what changed? Over the course of a couple of years, some impactful life circumstances swayed our perspective. First, our international adoption required the same home study training as a foster family. It quickly opened our eyes to the crisis, or the Ohio foster crisis. Yes, a 16,000 kid crisis, with 16% of those kids living in our own county. Second, our biological daughter at the age of 2 was handed a life-threatening diagnosis. And 2 months later, our international adoption was finalized, and we had to go to India to bring our son home. We quickly discovered that he had significantly bigger needs than we had anticipated. And despite us always saying we couldn't handle high needs or special needs, we watched as our family, our community rose to the occasion. We not only grew in knowledge, but also just the capacity to gracefully handle medical needs, handle hard, handle, quite frankly, just chaos. So then in 2022, we saw for the first time foster care in action through close friends who were licensed with Pathway. Our hearts instantly felt compassion, not only for the child, but also for the mom fighting to get her rights back. And lastly, because of COVID, Pathway trainings became virtual. And it's embarrassing to say, but being able to eat Chipotle in my sweatpants while doing training made all the difference. So ultimately, it was just our perspective that needed changing. We didn't change credentials, or we didn't start making more money. We still have the same family, the same house. I still lost my keys daily. Our 3 kids were still insanely wild. In reality, we just saw our village, we saw our capacity, we saw our love in a new light. They're all undeserved blessings from God that were never meant to be protectively clenched, but rather openly shared. Because the true heart behind foster care is less about getting a child for your family and more about giving your family to a child. It just started with a simple yes to open our home and open our hearts, with the intention to give as we've been given and love as we have been loved. Well, this mindset led my husband, to my surprise, to drawing a thick, dark, permanent pen line through every yes on our child checklist during our home study process, making our home open to all medical needs, all behavioral needs, even arson. So while I was thinking about how many more fire extinguishers we were going to need for fires ablazing, Jordan was encouraged that where we once found comfort and proficiency during previous tribulations, we surely would find it again, especially to support a family in need. Well, as you can guess, it wasn't long before we received our first call from Pathway. Seems like you'll take any child. Pathway described a micro-preemie baby boy with complex medical needs, ready for discharge and needing a family. To be honest, we had absolutely no experience in his medical needs, but Pathway certainly seemed to believe in us, so much so I remember them hanging up the phone quickly to rush our name to the county. I'll never know how many families said yes that day, but by grace alone, the county chose us. Now, I'm sure you all know that the system is a well-oiled machine where communication flows abundantly and accurately. Glad you laughed, because it's not. So in our case, we were given a yes from the county, and then we were ghosted for a month. And despite radio silence on where this baby was, Pathway continued to check in on us and mercifully answer or try to answer all of our questions. Then, much to our surprise, the morning of our flight for an out-of-town wedding, we received a call that BioMom had approved for us to be visitors in the hospital. The sooner we learned his care, the sooner they would approve discharge. We made ourselves available 2 hours later and spent the next week training, collecting supplies, and snuggling our baby. Then June 21st, after 7 months in the NICU, the hospital agreed to discharge him into our care with a promise to return in 48 hours for a scheduled surgery. Pathway welcomed our newest member with a backpack full of baby supplies and toys and a soft blue blanket. In just those short days, we saw this tiny infant who was labeled neurodiverse, hypersensitive, and even drugged for irritability transform into this nose-scrunching, cooing, wide smiling ball of joy, just from being in a consistent family. No matter how wonderful, no matter how intentional medical staff was for a 7-month-old, our eyes were open. Kids belong in families. Whether bio, kin, or foster, kids belong in families. By Monday, our hearts broke returning to the hospital so soon, but this time he wouldn't be alone. And when surgical complications landed him inpatient again, we promised not to leave his side. We watched as the inconsistent staff struggled for a whole week looking for answers, but eventually agreed maybe discharge was the solution. We left excited to finally settle him into our chaotic, loving home and hopeful it would get him into better health. But tragically, it was cut short within 24 hours. I can still see the vivid image of his small blue lips taking their last breath and his body going still. The next moments became one of the most terrifying moments of our lives. My husband Jordan performed CPR while I called 911, and soon we were surrounded by emergency vehicles rushing us back to the hospital. Shaking in fear, I spent a whole ambulance ride drowning in self-doubt. Had we failed this child? What were we doing thinking we could do this foster care thing? When he was finally stable in the PICU, we called the Pathway hotline. I remember Pathway encouraging us, saying, "Thank goodness he was in your care. Thank goodness you did all the right things." It led us to look at this helpless, vulnerable baby boy, and instead of feeling doubt, we were flooded with compassion. This child was fighting for his life because no consistent person knew his care. No one knew him well enough to keep him healthy or safe, not even doctors. No one on earth knew him. And doesn't every child deserve to be known? His life was depending on people willing to stand in the gap. We had to stop worrying about our hearts being hurt. We had to lay down our pride and accept we need to give our family to this child, even if one day he was taken away from ours. Holding back love to protect our hearts would only protect us from doing this job well. So again, we simply said yes. We gave him love that wasn't guarded or earned, but rather generous and unconditional. We let that love drive to learn his care, learn his history, love his family, and advocate with everything we had. The point being, we took our yes very seriously. In Pathway, they were there to stand in the gap with us too. They immediately got to work taking parts of responsibility and lightening the load for us. They supported our family with gift cards and reminded us to track our mileage as we drove daily to the hospital to switch which parent was spending the night. They did all the paperwork and handling the logistics of changing our foster son's care level and providing us with more resources. Even over a holiday weekend, they stepped in to help mediate between the county and the hospital to approve for critical medical treatment. Without telling this baby boy's whole story, I'll just share that during our month-long stay in the hospital, we received the devastating news that this child would not be returning to his bio mom. And when I didn't know how to best handle this situation, a Pathway worker called me to not only check up on our foster son, but check up on us. The thoughtful gesture opened a door to a tearful and honest conversation, leaving me feeling truly heard and understood by someone who understood or could relate to the roller coaster of foster care. Today, that tiny NICU baby boy who fought for every breath is a joyful, thriving, deeply loved 5-year-old boy who we are honored to call our own. Jamie Finn says, behind every foster parent who keeps going is a circle who refuses to let them do it alone. Community isn't a bonus. Community is survival. And honestly, this is where I love to brag about Pathway. During our son's 3 years in care, we had possibly a record-breaking number of caseworkers in some unprecedented situations, even for foster care. Yet our Pathway caseworker was the picture of consistency, calm, and supportive. John always showed up. Whether it was home visits, court hearings, insane SARs, or even our son's personal adoption party, he never missed. Recently, we heard he retired from doing home visits, and I like to think it's because we too had decided to stop long-term foster placements. But in September, we received a desperate call from a neighbor asking if we would consider fostering her niece. Our yes was definitely decided with more ease, knowing we'd have Pathway support. And much to our delight, on our very first Pathway home visit, our house was filled with nostalgic squeals and kids fighting over who got to open the door and the infamous shouts of Johnny from our children as he stepped back into the chaos I like to think he secretly missed. Even as more seasoned foster parents, Pathway didn't hesitate to welcome our daughter and start supporting us as the roller coaster of foster care started quite quickly. We wouldn't be here today without Pathway standing in the gap for families like ours. We couldn't be the consistency these kids need without Pathway's dedication and consistency to us. We are so thankful for their vision, their mission, and for empowering the children and families they serve. Foster care burnout is a major crisis. Google told me 30 to 50% of foster families quit each year, and nearly half of all newly licensed homes close within the first 12 months due to stress, lack of support, or behavior challenges. Foster families say yes to children all the time, but foster families can only keep saying yes when someone says yes to them. Community isn't a bonus, community is survival. Community looks like Pathway providing Christmas and birthday gifts, respite care, gift cards, zoo memberships, ample trainings, family events, and counseling. Community is pathways showing up for my family and having the relief that they understand my kids are probably not going to look or behave typical, and that's okay. We know that not everyone can say yes to fostering one of the 16,000 plus Ohio children in foster care. But for those of us who can say yes, we thrive on the support of a community saying yes to our family. And when we thrive, our kids thrive, and every child deserves